legal, human resources, finance. We're also graced with the presence of people talking to us about what's going to happen from a wholesale perspective of things, and definitely from a sourcing standpoint. What do we do? Goods are trapped in China, things are being held up in India. How do we manage our cash flow? What do we do in this interim time period as we're looking to see how business is going to change? Now, I'm telling you, before we get started, we don't have all the answers. We might have a combined amount of maybe 100 years of experience. I don't know. We've all been doing this for a very long time. But when it comes to the advice and counsel we're going to give you, we'll give you the best information that we can, answering the questions that you have to really figure out, what do you do during a time of crisis? How should you be managing your business, your employees? What on earth do you do with cash flow and funding, financing? And how do you start to manage these tricky decisions around balancing inventory and really working with relationships and partnerships? So without further ado, I'm going to have our panelists introduce themselves, and we'll go through that quickly so we can really get on to some of these burning questions. So I'm going to call you guys off as I see you. I know all of our Zoom screens are situated differently, but over to my left, I have Hillary from Brand Assembly. Hillary, thank you for joining us. How are things going over there?
Hey, I'm up here in Hudson, New York. I'm Hillary France. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Brand Assembly. And in a nutshell, we're basically a resource center for emerging to mid-sized brands through our trade shows, our back office services, as well as 2 co-working spaces, one in New York and one in Los Angeles. So have a lot of different perspectives on what's going on right now from retailers and from brands. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much. I'm sure there's gonna be so many questions for you. I already got like 1,000 on my mind. Swot, you're up next. Where are you coming from, and what's going on in your neck of the woods?
Hi, everyone. I'm the co-founder and creative director of Stateless Fashion Design and Consulting. We are based in New York City. We are an outsourced team of product designers, developers, and production managers. We also offer full branding services. We are currently dealing with just halts in sampling, in sourcing, in production, and product development across the board. We are pivoting every day just to reroute things, restructure our processes, and to just figure out how to move forward during this time. So really looking forward to talking with all of you about what you guys are up to and how we can help and guide throughout this process.
Wonderful. Andrea, coming to us from the West Coast, please tell us what's the climate like out there? How are things?
It's sunny. I'm in Los Angeles. It's sunny, but for us a little bit chilly in the low 60s. My name is Andrea Channewater, and I'm a fractional CFO. I run teams of people who wrangle dollar signs, everything from bookkeeping to financials, accounting, high-level budgeting. Yeah, if you got a dollar sign problem, we're gonna wrangle it.
I think everyone has dollar sign problems now. So thank you for saving the world with their dollar sign problems. Danielle?
Right now, we're really heavy in strategy and triage and cash flow management.
No joke. I think triage is like the best way to put where maybe all of us are right now. That's a really, it's a very timely and sobering word to use. Danielle, thank you for joining us. Tell us how things are in Florida.
Well, I think we've gotten rid of all the spring breakers in Miami, so I will apologize on behalf of Miami Beach for that. So my name is Danielle Garno. I'm a partner at the global law firm of Cozen O'Connor and head of our retail practice. And I also specialize in fashion and beauty. And most of my clients are in the fashion and beauty space. And I represent anybody from startup to multinational. And I think really what I'm seeing now is a whole lot of what do I do with my employees in this situation? How can I keep the business afloat? What do my contracts look like? What rights do I have? You know, those are the kind of issues that we're fielding day to day, hour to hour.
So you're busy. Seems like everyone so far is very busy, right? In the time of stress, there are the first responders in our industry, and it sounds like you're definitely first responding to a lot of these issues. You know?
Yeah, it's not something I enjoy because this is a panic situation, but trying to help out where we can.
Well, thanks for rolling up your sleeves. Next, we have Tim. Tim, thank you for joining us from New York. How are things going out there, and what's the climate like?
Oh my God, it's brutal, but that's just say that very lightly. However, we're hanging in there. I mean, we have, I'm Tim Moore, I'm with Hilden Corporation. I'm an executive there for over 20 years, and we have over 500 brands that we work with, active brands that are selling to retailers all over the world. And I pretty much field about 30, 40 calls a day on what should I do next? What am I doing now? How am I going to fund it? How am I going to finance it? How am I going to, what should I produce for next season? Should I produce for this season? What should I do when the store tells me this? You know, it's been absolutely bonkers.
All right. Well, I'm sure these are wartime stories for you, and sounds like this is where we earn our stripes, as they say. So thank you for joining us. And Holly, also coming to us from Los Angeles. What's going on in your neck of the woods? How's business going?
Hi, good morning. Business is a little challenging. So I am an HR consultant. Obviously, I'm here in LA. I work specifically with small businesses and startups, kind of just helping them navigate rapid expansion, and most recently this COVID-19. So right now, focusing a lot on all of the new laws that are coming into place, that have just come into place, that are coming down the pipeline, and trying to help interpret those for clients and make good decisions going forward, and then hopefully share it with all of you. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you all for being here. Just a reminder to our attendees, our audience, please ask your questions. This is definitely an opportunity to get 6 amazing brains, 6.5 if you include mine, on some of the biggest questions and issues that are coming against your business. So this is a rare and amazing opportunity to troubleshoot things. We do have some questions that our audience has emailed to us in advance, so I'm going to get started with some of those. But as people have questions, we will be pivoting and giving answers. I do kind of want to open this up to your guys' perspective on really what's happening on all of this talk of stimulus package and money and just really kind of how people are looking at the small business funding and what that means. And so I think that's really on the topmost of many people's minds. And I'd love to have you, Tim, just kind of walk us through kind of what your perspective is right now on funding and money and what's happening from the loan side of things.
Yeah, I mean, what I see is everybody's trying to leverage everything. Whatever they have, they're trying to leverage. So if they have receivables, they're trying to leverage the receivables. What I mean by that is if they don't have a receivable line of credit in place, they're trying to borrow against the receivables. If they have purchase orders, they're trying to get funding against their purchase orders. If they have a direct-to-consumer business, which is their main part of the business, they're trying to leverage that part of the business for some type of funding. And that funding is either for survival or it's because they want to finish their production because they have a likelihood they're going to be shipping again in the next few months. And if they don't have those assets to leverage, they're looking to the SBA. And the SBA, they've been funding small businesses for a long time, but now they have a government program in which they're actually funding, which they're doing it behind other lenders, which is important. So they're actually lending behind other lenders, which may be already lending you money, which is kind of unique. So the SBA is one, then the government's providing grants. Basically, everybody's strapping, looking for whatever they can get in terms of intermediate funding so they can survive for the next few months, or funding so they can figure out how to produce next season.
Got it. And so when you're thinking about things like, the access to that capital and kind of the timeline that it might take for someone to receive, these resources, are you thinking, I know the package is being currently passed. Are we looking at someone who's able to get resources and funding within a week, or are we looking at within 3 months or in 6 months? As business owners are trying to raise or cover their expenses, how far out should they be looking at in terms of, when they might be able to receive those dollars?
Well, if they're able to leverage assets and they're able to get funding against receivables or purchase orders or against their direct consumer business, that can happen very quick. I think banks have never been the fastest, and they're certainly not going to be the quickest in this environment. But any other type of lender outside of a bank, non-traditional as they call it, can fund very quickly, probably in a few weeks if they have the assets to borrow against. If they're trying to go through the SBA, it sounds like that's a minimum of a month, and that's if you can somehow figure out how to get all the paperwork in quickly and process very quickly. So I would say it's really more or less a month and a half, probably almost even 2 months for that matter, by the time you get all the paperwork in. And then who knows with these grants, yeah.
Got it. So then turning this question over to Andrea, then if we have a business who's now looking at potential, let's say they've already started to see their POs start to get cut. They're already starting to see strap in their cash flow. Layoffs are imminent. If it is going to be, let's say, a month and a half, or maybe even, let's say, 2 months, how should these small businesses start to take a look at their existing cash flow, burn rate, and what are some of the changes and things that we need to start looking at?
Well, what's been pretty successful for quite a few groups that I've been working with over the last week or two is taking a look at what some of the biggest costs are, and also taking a look at which costs can be negotiable. So things like rent is often negotiable. Oftentimes, some of the suppliers are willing to negotiate. And one kind of creative solution that we've had a lot of success on is pushing back on those people and saying, look, we're partners and we've been partners for a while. We trust each other, particularly those that you really like working with, and try to push out those payments and due dates out a few weeks, a month or two if you can, until you can get either more sales coming in or some emergency funding. And for the groups that I've been working with, there's been a lot of positive feedback that those that are owed money are willing to push out their due dates and their terms a little bit longer, just to keep that relationship alive. Because once the money starts flowing in, those people are still going to want to keep that relationship with you. So I really encourage the small businesses right now to take a look at the immediate costs that are piling up, and take a look at the biggest ones and the ones that are with groups that you have a strong relationship with.
Got it. And I guess kind of then turning this to where we're looking at negotiating terms, or we're looking at areas where we might be able to, have good faith relationships. So much of business, I think, has been done on a handshake in our industry for a long time, especially along the lines of manufacturing. And so, Swot, my question for you is, coming off of Andrea's, hey, it's time to become a bit friendlier, maybe with your manufacturer, your supply chain. I always like to say it's like one of those relationships where where people like love to hate each other, but then at the day, everyone's trying to hold hands, no matter how much you might be screaming at your manufacturer. What are you seeing and experiencing in terms of these kinds of termed relationships and negotiations on the supply chain?
Yeah, this is something, it's a great question and something that we're dealing with just on a daily basis. So, we have over 75 clients worldwide, and, we can only project our calendars and our pipeline and our timeline with what we know today. Basically, if vendors are closed for a month or they're closed for 2 weeks. So we've updated all of our charts and calendars for all of our brands across the board. But, our clients and our brands, some are small size, some are medium sized. Some of them have asked what the factory is willing to negotiate, for them and for us, in terms of holding the goods, in terms of, when they open up, especially with product that's super seasonal right now. We have really, really awesome relationships with factories all over the world. And we're in conversations with them now in terms of, once they do open up, what does their timeline actually look like? What are they willing to do? Can we split the PO? Can they ship half the goods as soon as they reopen? Can they ship goods like 3 months later or 2 months later, just to stagger the cash flow for our brands? Then we're asking, our clients on the brand side, what do you guys think about holding your launch for until another season. So if they were set to launch in July and August, you know, and we're supposed to be in production right now, that's not going to happen. So, you know, what is the willingness of the brand from a marketing perspective, from a PR perspective? What are the opportunities to collaborate with other brands, collaborate with influencers, and just kind of get behind the other pieces of the pie in order to keep their process moving? But in terms of the cash flow, we are speaking with all of our factories in terms of what they are willing to do in that relationship sense. It's a relationship-based industry, especially with our factories and all of our vendors. So luckily we have amazing relationships with everybody. So we're just, you know, getting down to brass tacks, you know, figuring out what the next best thing is in terms of next steps to do with all of our clients and for all of our brands. You know, we came to a pause on a lot of stuff, you know, starting last week as you know, the news came trickling down with lockdowns and with, you know, vendors closing down, factories closing, mills closing. So we've been pivoting. We're really agile in terms of like, you know, do we need to take our project to another factory? I mean, the vendors that are up and running with no delays right now for us is in China. So our projects that we have with our Chinese factories are running. We're getting samples, you know, we're getting fabrics for sourcing. So that, like, that's okay, but that's about 8 to 10 clients that we have right now. So the rest that are in other parts of the world and in the United States, you know, we are speaking with them day in and day out to get a strategy, to get a plan in place for when the vendors do open up.
Thank you. You know, I think I want to piggyback off of that and kind of take it to Hillary from the standpoint of brands launching and market and how retailers are, what the feedback you're hearing from your brands, and also just, you know, from a trade show standpoint. You know, I'd say that about, you know, a week ago, we were all like, all right, well, you know, August market's going to be crazy because everyone's going to be like dying for business, and you know, what is it going to look like? And obviously on a day-by-day basis, it just feels like everything's shifting and changing. Swot's talking about holding launches maybe out until February, or, you know, obviously there's a different strategy between direct to consumer and going after retail stores. What is your finger on the pulse? How are you seeing, what are you hearing from your brands, and what kind of advice are you offering to those who are wondering, you know, what does this mean about my samples and showing during, you know, spring, summer market? How do I navigate that?
Definitely. I mean, it's crazy what has happened in the last week and a half, 2 weeks. We had just finished our fall winter market in Los Angeles 2 weeks ago. And, you know, we had almost a full house. We had only 2 or 3 brands drop right before we actually went to market, just because they either had elderly parents or whatever the case might be. But we actually, you know, came out there like very excited, you know, and here we are 2 weeks later, and it's a much different picture that we're painting of this scenario. You know, so all of our brands that went to market for that fall winter are now not getting confirmed orders from that market. You know, they're trying to evaluate. So we do the trade shows, but we also do the back office. So on the back office side, we're seeing retailers cancel orders. We're seeing retailers asked to hold or check back in a couple weeks. You know, with obviously no end in sight or any kind of guidance from the government at this moment of when we'll all get back into it. There's just a lot of questions, and we're doing the best to field that. We're being extremely communicative to our brands and even our retailers. Yesterday, we launched a Slack channel for all of our brands that we touch on, just to be able to communicate. We have, you know, one that's specifically dedicated to COVID. We have, you know, just some laughs and lightheartedness to keep people going during these times. So it's something that we're excited to see engagement from our brands from that perspective, because as we were mentioning earlier, you're just having to work together in this on the retailer and the brand side is really the only way that we're going to get through this. So even though that retailers are canceling orders in this moment, they're panicking, the brands are panicking. You know, we really need to evaluate. The thing that we need the most now is to understand when we can actually transact in person again. And I think that's the biggest target. You know, we're missing that target point to actually start with plans. On the trade show perspective, to answer your first question, our next trade show is going to be in June. And I say going to be because I'm a very optimistic person. So we really are still planning, towards that. Obviously, we know that brands are not committing right now. They don't know, what's going on when they can actually transact again, which we totally understand. But we're still planning on our end, like that's going to actually happen because, during that time, these stores are going to want goods. They just canceled all these goods. They're either going to want immediate, and that might become a more immediate market than a resort market. So that's what we're kind of just talking through on our perspective. But yeah, as a trade show, thank God we have other parts of our business, but as a trade show business, it's definitely, a concern even on my end as a small business of how to navigate that as well.
Thank you. And as far as like how you're seeing your direct to consumer brands that you support, and those components, what I've been so fascinated by is, amidst a sea of possibly closing 3PLs and warehouses, I've seen so many small businesses really be able to keep their doors open because they ship from their studios or they ship from, other locations. How are you seeing your direct to consumer, or even brands that have an e-com presence? How are you seeing them navigate this?
Obviously, it's great to have that outlet at the moment. I'm sure everybody has seen a dip in sales. The consumer is probably holding on to all of their dollars. So even though they have this straight line without having to transact in person, I think, as a consumer, we're not spending, or we're really only spending on the essentials. So, a lot of our clients are asking us what they should do. We've talked about strategies of how to preserve cash, but also, curate longevity in products. So if you just launch spring or if you just launch summer, depending on where you stand, making sure that you're not launching everything all at once, so that there is still newness going into the next month or the following month, so that you have these kind of waves. As a small designer, we deal with a lot of small designers that only deliver 2 seasons per year. So, thinking about taking some of that product off, relaunching it at a later date, just again, to preserve cash, get that longevity and get some newness out on their e-commerce websites.
Awesome. Thank you. And to flip this more internal ops, Holly, what are you hearing from employees and independent contractors in these offices? I mean, I can imagine that there is a lot of uncertainty. How are you advising your clients to be having these kinds of conversations? What are the kinds of conversations that need to be happening as leadership has to be able to, and I mean, all of us here who are running business, we all need this advice, right? How do we as leaders in our own organizations, and also, as other retail and brands, how do we communicate what's happening to employees in a way that doesn't cause a panic and that is also empathic, but provides a sense of direction? What have you been talking about?
So employees really, all the employees that I've been speaking with the last week or so have been really understanding. And I think the point that you hit on about, being empathic is really important. I think, you don't want to share every detail, with them, obviously, but you want to give them a really good idea of what's going on with the company and with them, and map out clear expectations of what the next couple of weeks look like if you have that idea. I think a lot of us aren't really even looking beyond, maybe mid-April, just because we're dealing with the here and now in this moment. So I think, I think there's some nervousness from, both independent contractors and employees. And I think just providing them information and also resources to help them get through is comforting. And I think it helps culturally and with commitment. So whether you're furloughing employees and they need to know that their benefits are still going to be covered, or they can apply for, unemployment insurance, things like that. I think just uncertainty can be a little bit scary. And so speaking into that instead of being silent can provide comfort.
I think that's great. I mean, I just from an external standpoint, I feel that brands who fail to communicate even to their customer base right now are the ones who are losing. And the people who are having communication very transparently and open are the ones who are winning. To kind of leverage that a little bit. So Danielle, when we're talking about having communication and deciding, do I furlough? Do I let someone go? You know, how do I kind of answer these questions around the legal components of employment? What are the ways in which these small business owners should be thinking about employment issues, contractor issues? I mean, certainly, you know, independent contractor rules have obviously changed in different states. And, you know, I feel like every moment there's like a new statute or new law against it. Like, how do we handle contracts and employment issues?
Right. So yes, they are constantly changing. And recently, we just saw Congress pass the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which goes into effect on April 1st, and it runs until December 31st of 2020. And for this, and I guess the short answer to answer your question as to whether to furlough or lay off or just terminate, it really just depends on what the business can handle from a cash flow perspective. You know, the good news is now that these loans are becoming available, well, hopefully today, if it passes the House, that these small business loans will become available, and that might give some, security and some reassurance and allow the employers to go ahead and either keep their employees or rehire back the employees that they've already let go or furloughed or laid off.
And Danielle, could you give a little bit of definition to our audience on like what a furlough is, what it means, kind of what, just terminating someone, just some quick definitions, please.
Yeah, I can actually do that. So I have a terminology sheet.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm not going to do this off the cuff. So when we're talking about a layoff occurs when an employer temporarily removes all employees from payroll from lack of work. Okay, that's different from a furlough, which is considered to be an alternative to a layoff, which requires employees to work either fewer hours in the week or take off a certain amount of time. So they're not essentially being let go. And then a termination, of course, is when the employees, that relationship is then terminated. So the reason why it's important in these situations is because it can essentially affect what the employee benefits, what they're entitled to, whether or not they can go ahead and seek unemployment insurance benefits.
Got it. And as far as the other contracts that you're seeing outside of unemployment, are there other kinds of contracts and issues that you're seeing that are rising that maybe small businesses are not considering outside of unemployment and hiring issues?
Yeah, I mean, what we're really seeing now, and there's been a lot of talk, well, let's talk about rent for those that have brick and mortar. It's hard to pay, your rent when you're shut down and not bringing in any revenue. Again, hopefully this SBA loan situation will help that. But there may be certain clauses in your contract. We talked a lot about us in the legal industry about this clause called force majeure. And this is kind of a clause which is what we consider boilerplate. So you have your term, your rental terms, and then there's a whole bunch of legal language that nobody ever reads and nobody's looked at. And really include this force majeure clause, which means that if there's some sort of act of God, war, destruction, hurricane, tornado, whatever, that may excuse the performance of the parties. Now, it may include language like pandemic, disease, I don't know another word for that, but if it includes that language, then generally the clause will apply, which may excuse the tenant from paying rent. These clauses are really interpreted quite narrowly, so if it doesn't include that language, it probably won't apply. But again, strongly recommend that if you have that clause in your lease, that you want to take a look at that and see if it may apply. And that is the same with any kind of vendor contract. It may be in your PO, it may be in whatever agreement you have. So you want to take a look at that to make sure that either you can use that if, somebody isn't negotiating, I think, in good faith, and you want to make sure that it can't be used against you to hurt you in some sort of way. Yeah, so that, and then the other thing that small businesses might want to take a look at is their insurance policy, and to see whether there's some sort of business interruption insurance. May or may not apply in this situation. There's a lot of litigation around what that means and whether or not it can apply, but that's something definitely to take a look at. And certain states are looking at it differently as to whether or not those clauses can be applied in this sort of pandemic situation. So.
Got it. So there's a lot. So having a good legal person like yourself is going to be critical for navigating these kinds of times. I think that we have a lot of questions around the issues of furloughs and layoffs and financial implications. And Andrea, I'd love to kind of get your thoughts here on how might an employer make those decisions, and how might that kind of impact long-term planning? What does that mean, and what should they be considering as they make that decision?
Definitely. I want to address some of the long-term issues, because there's probably an organization out there, maybe it's like a service organization, like a restaurant or a coffee shop, or maybe like a membership club, where the employees have specialized knowledge about how that organization works. And if an employer has to put pause on employment, letting some of those workers go and then not be sure that they're going to come back when the doors open up again causes a problem down the line. Like, who is going to run, say, these like computer systems or customer service? Like, who's going to know some of the clients or the vendors that's really important in the organization? And so that's why I really encourage groups to look at furloughing, and also think about the level of transparency you can provide for your employees, and being kind and compassionate and having good communication with them to let them know if they are truly a valued employee. Then let them know, like, hey, I want you back, but the situation out there is that I can't make that happen right now, but there's a place for you in the future. To keep that relationship open. Sometimes when an employer's laying off an employee, they just sort of like shut the door, and that employee's kind of out in the cold, and might have some hard feelings about coming back. And then performance, I see on the CFO side, performance sometimes really suffers if there isn't that clarity and that compassion on the employer's side.
Thank you. And Holly, kind of coming from internal and from the HR standpoint, is there anything else you want to add on the furlough unemployment issue before we move on to lots of other questions about lots of other things that everyone's burning? I know I've been hogging a lot of this question time, but I thought it was good to kind of paint the picture. So Holly, take us home here on your thoughts on furloughing and unemployment.
Yeah, I just wanted to, call out a couple of details about furloughs, specifically in California. I think it's California and Massachusetts currently have more particular laws about furloughing versus layoffs versus termination. So, to kind of put it in perspective, so layoffs, whether it's, temporary or permanent, are really terminations. And so you're going to want to make sure that you're complying with all like your state and federal laws as far as what that employee's owed. And then with furloughs in the state of California, you do need to actually treat it similar to a termination, in that you're going to need to pay out any earned wages or accrued but unused PTO. So I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned that, because it's legally required. You wouldn't be able to put them on a furlough and then just kind of keep all the money that they've earned so far. And I think it's also super important to note for furloughs, with the communication that you're providing to employees, just making sure that you're really documenting all of the changes that you're making and then communicating that to them. One of those things should be that they're not going to be able to perform any work if you're putting them on like an unpaid type leave. Making sure that they know that they may be still eligible for their health benefits, or potentially like their 401ks, things like that. But you would want to definitely double check your plan documents, and then also just to kind of protect yourself as a business. You have these like really wonderful employees and they might think it's super helpful to send an email, right? And then you end up having to pay them for like a full week of their salary because they sent an email because they thought they were being helpful, which is super appreciated. But at the same time, like, if you're doing it to save money, it could end up costing you. So just thinking about things like, turning off access to some of those accounts that they may usually be able to access, but also then communicating that to them, like, here's why, and here's how long we're hoping for. And then also just, really protecting yourself with letting them know, like, we're really hopeful that this is temporary, but then kind of reserving that right to extend or change or alter. So it's just being super clear to them and also really protecting yourself.
Got it. I think that's a really good point. I think a lot of the small business owners here are clearly hearing it's good to communicate, but they're also wondering, what the hell do I do if I don't have any money? And I think it's really important that we really address some of the major issues, which are like, cash flow pinch. How do you manage your staff? How do you make sure there's clear communication that this is their end date, taking away some access to systems, and being clear. So I'm going to just run through some questions here that we have from our audience. Some of them are going to be a little more rapid fire, and then some of them are going to be a bit longer. But the first one here, Danielle, is for you. Kimberly asks what the name of the clauses again, the one for the brick and mortar and not being able to pay rent. What should they be looking for in those contracts?
It's called a force majeure clause, MAJEURE, force FORCE. That's the name of the clause. What you're going to be looking for specifically in relationship to this is any kind of language that could encompass, what we're seeing, like pandemic, disease, words like that might cover what we're experiencing now.
Got it. And maybe if someone is going to be leasing a space in the future, that might be an important clause to make sure that's in there. Are there other things we might want to be looking at, what to add into our contracts once this situation gets a bit better?
Yeah, I think as lawyers, we were all like, just took like a huge and now we got to go back and look at all of our, and re-look at our clauses and make sure that they're, the contracts are tightened up. And going forward, you're going to see a lot of very specific drafting, I think.
Yeah, I agree. This is again a busy time to be a lawyer. Tim, I don't know if you'll be able to answer this question about kind of the loans aspect of the SBA, but we have an audience member, Laura, who's asked us about kind of the some of the stipulations around it. If they do furlough employees, can they still apply for an SBA loan? Do you know if there are any like big contingencies right now that would prevent someone for being able to apply? Should everyone be applying for as much funding as possible? How are you advising your brands to be accessing capital right now?
From my understanding, I think I'm told that everybody should be applying, that there are no restrictions, and that everybody should put in their application. From what I understand, and I sat through that same webinar, it is a tedious process. So if you're going to do it, get started on it. You may want to hire somebody to do it. From what I saw, is that it's quite an ordeal. But once all the paperwork gets through, it takes about 30 days to find out whether you're approved, and another couple weeks to get funded. So, so from my understanding, there's no restrictions. So by all means, I think everybody should start putting in the SBA. If it's for the SBA, it's a low interest, deferred interest. And it's, like I said before, it's behind any other current lender that you have.
Got it. Okay. So go after as much capital as you can, hit up all the resources and kind of see where things might shake out. I think the other important thing here is, as Andrea mentioned before, with this lead time, with this 2-month potential lead time to accessing any resources, there is going to need to be, even if you do get funding to be able to maintain business as usual, for the next 2 months, business will not be as usual. So the need to not pretend as if things are the same, things will have to change, and possibly looking at these temporary furloughs and kind of restructuring some of these contracts might be something to look at. Today's Friday, something to look at over the weekend. So Monday morning, you can make some changes internally, even if it's on a temporary basis.
I think all of our clients are planning for a month delay, 2-month delay, 3-month delay. And I think you just have to come up with all these different scenarios in your business. Can you cover overhead for a month until we're up and running again? Can you do 2 months, 3 months? And then how fast is going to get up and running again? So everybody's trying to figure out a game plan for all these different scenarios. And I think every business really has to take a look at it and work out their overhead so they can survive for the next 1 to 4 months.
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as Tim, what you're seeing in terms of canceled purchase orders, obviously that's kind of a big deal, right? Hillary's on the front lines working with brands. I'm on the front lines with brands. Like, how are you seeing, are all retailers canceling purchase orders? Are some of them still being, fulfilled? What does it look like right now on the retailer side?
This is actually probably the biggest question I see out there, and it's so fluid and changing regularly. Initially, all the majors basically went to all their brands and just canceled everything. I'm talking about Saks, Neiman's, Nordstrom's, Shopbop, even Shopbop, owned by Amazon, canceling orders. And that was their first inclination, their first reaction, their first gut reaction, to cancel orders. And then all the brands kind of freaked out, and they all went back to the stores individually and worked out deals. So it's not, even though it struck everybody as an initial, everybody's canceling everything, really not the case. I mean, there are going to be some cancellations, no doubt about it, but pretty much the stores are willing to work with you. What I mean by work with you, push off delivery dates, take extended terms to pay, reduce the orders, and a variety of other different consignment I hear, discounts, a little bit of everything. All the retailers are willing to work something out.
Super great. And Hillary, as far as what you're seeing kind of on the front lines, can you tell me a little bit about how your brands and retailers are experiencing these canceled POs and looks like restructuring and changing on terms?
Yeah, so to piggyback off Tim and I and my clients work with Hilden a lot. So, it's interesting because we also play both sides. We have a trade event that has retailers coming, and we also have our brands that participate. And a lot of our brands were panicking because of these canceled orders, as Tim said, and and they're like, how could they do this to us? How could they do this to us? Like, don't they understand this will put us out of business? But I was like, well, you have to see both sides. If you're shipping goods and they're not even open, they can't even afford to, pay you. So, we have to work together on this. And, especially the boutiques. So in a time where people are like, oh, relationships mean nothing nowadays, sometimes in this industry, relationships mean everything right now, and making sure that you're picking up the phone, and we're all in the same boat together. Like, let's see what we can do to figure this out. And, things are still closed. Let's give it a week. Let's give it 2 weeks. And then let's start to have those conversations again of how we can work together. It's really important.
Got it. Thank you. So I'm going to go back to some of these other pretty clear questions here. Hillary, I think you would be great to answer this one. Cece asks us if we feel this is a lost season for cruise and resort. What do you think is going to happen for cruise and resort?
I'll try not to go too long on this answer. I think you really have to look at the product that you have, or what type of seasonality you are as a brand. I have a brand that's extremely resort and spring and summer centric, and she saw kind of the tail end of her spring orders get canceled, but not shipping her summer. And there's been a lot of strategies thrown around with retailers, but I said, I think what a lot of these brands are going to have to think about is taking a season off, and as far as development is concerned, and re-strategizing how to use that product. So for this client in particular, she has, like I said, a very resort driven product. So her summer, I was like, just hold on to that and push it back to your normal July and August dates, was actually true summer, that people are going to want to buy again, and, push back your fall delivery to the resort. So, I think it's in a perspective of like, let's try to maybe take one of these seasons out. And I do think that resorts, the June market, which we obviously are planning for ourselves, is going to be a hybrid of resort product and immediates, and really seeing these stores needing product after not being in business for a while and wanting some freshness. So that's not like a clear answer on what to do exactly for resort, but I do think that everybody has to evaluate their seasons, what they can do with product that's already produced, how they can fit it into different holes, and conserving cash on that, which means, obviously trying to save on development costs.
Mm-hmm. And Swot, just to kind of go off of the seasonality and how easy it's going to be to kind of shift around styles and production and start to kind of look at this mosaic of, what the next, I would say, 12 months look like of collection planning, right? Where we're seeing this kind of, what's the new carryover? What's going to be the new newness? How do we start to make these collections a bit more modular, if we will, or kind of assorting them differently? On the production side of things, how is that kind of strategy, which I think a lot of brands are looking to, right? How do I kind of hack this together? How is that panning out, or what do you see on the manufacturing side to support that? And how can brands kind of work with manufacturing to ensure a strategy like that can be carried off successfully?
Yeah, we've been having the same conversations, to piggyback on what Hillary just mentioned about the seasonality of things. So for example, we had a client that production was scheduled to ship in April, the latest by May 1 for delivery. That's obviously not going to happen. The factory is closed. So, her collection it's somewhat seasonal for spring. She can push it out and deliver it for fall holiday, put some marketing around it, or she could maybe soft launch it in January, February, put some marketing around that, and then go full force for a spring 21. Obviously, that's hard for cash flow purposes, when she had planned to launch it in May. However, the seasonality, we work with a lot of brands that season not that it doesn't matter, we work with a lot of DTC, a lot of direct to consumer brands. And the seasonality of things is something that we're talking with clients about on the daily basis. I mean, if it's like outerwear, heavyweight jackets, obviously that's more of like October Q4 types of deliveries. If it is not specifically spring, summer centric, if there's a little wiggle room, for us, it's not so much about speaking to our brands about canceling orders, because that has been a question, and obviously people are freaking out across the board, but it's more about how do we course correct what we have on the table now in terms of designs, fabrics, seasonality, to sort of create a collection going forward, just pending on when these factories are going to reopen, and just seeing how we can go forward. On the manufacturer's side, they're willing to work with us in whatever ways we can. Obviously, they want to save orders. They don't like to see, their POs are being cut in half by retailers on the daily basis. We haven't had to do that. However, we are talking with manufacturers about holding goods, or, making the terms extended on payments, things of that nature, and just really working with our brands on the collections that we have. We're in so many different stages of the development process and the product life cycle at this moment. We've got samples that were on the line. We had fabric that had just been cut. We had samples that were ready to ship, production that's in the middle. Like we're in so many different places with all of our brands. So it's really about course correcting for us for each of them individually, so they have a plan of action and a plan of attack that's right for them. So I mean, we don't know the answers in terms of like when this is all going to be over. We're planning for when we have projected dates for some of the vendors to reopen. So I think we're doing the best we can in terms of working with what we have. not, freaking out and slashing orders and things like that, but working with what we have, being smart, being creative. How do we pivot? What market can we get into? Like those types of things. And then also not placing so much emphasis on seasonality. Really like working that in to be like, okay, unless it's like swimsuits and parka jackets, those are very, very seasonal. But if you can, spring and fall, you can kind of do a little bit of a crossover there. And then just seeing how we can push our brands to market the products in a way that will get them sales.
Thank you. Yeah, it sounds like there's no one answer. Everyone is putting together a strategy of multiple ways of being agile. And I think one of the benefits here is that every single component of our industry is feeling it together. So while there is a sense of, hey, this is happening to my particular business, it's happening to everyone's business. And so there's almost a way of having a lot of empathy for each other. And it sounds like this workshopping approach is not only being successful for some of your clients right now, but also as we're looking from the sides of employment and product and distribution, leveraging those relationships and being modular is increasingly important. Andrea, I wanted to kind of turn the conversation over to you and kind of the notion of getting some more control over profit margins, right? So we talked a little bit about what are the cost centers, what are the ways in which brands can start to look at decreasing costs. As far as looking at, product profit margins or, ways of being able to maybe even negotiate or think about product differently or maybe overhead or margins and in general, how are you advising brands and how should they be thinking about margins? Do they need to be planning to, put everything on sale at this point? Should they be really kind of forecasting, all right, this quarter is going to be significant decline and hey, maybe in Q3 things are going to pick up. How should businesses be looking at margin planning?
That's so specific to each organization, both their products and how much cash they have and how well they think they can weather the storm. I think one of the things they can think about, we've talked quite a bit in this particular webinar about seasonality. So you're probably not selling swimsuits in November per se, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, but is there another creative way that you can sell that when there is a little bit more cash and there is product moving and demand for that? I think just get really creative. I don't really have a good answer.
That's okay. I think the thing too,
everybody, because it's really, really specific to each organization. I think in terms of like whole health for an organization, which also ties pretty closely in with some aspects of profit margin, is to use this time where it doesn't feel like you could do a whole lot for your organization, and use this time to think internally what is happening. Are there things and areas of my organization that I can clean up? My accounting, my systems, do my systems not talk to each other? This sort of like slow sales time is a really, really excellent time to get those things moving along, cleaned up. Another area I think that can be really, really helpful is looking over strategy. And that might also include pricing strategy and profit margin strategies. Look into the history of the organization, past sales, how have they done? Have they done product pushes that have been really successful, some that haven't, and take a really deep dive into what worked in the past and what didn't, and maybe revisit it and tweak it a little bit for what's going to be coming up soon.
I think that's a good point. There's the 30,000 feet, which I think a lot of people are not looking at, which is the moment this is over, we're going to be back in business. And so it's not like retail is somehow disappearing and, in the next year, there's not going to be anyone shopping. This is very, very, very much a very short-term, drastic and dramatic occurrence and experience that we're having, but the market will rebound, consumer spending will shift. Again, consumers are still buying things. I think we also fail to realize that it's not as if no one's shopping anymore. Why else are things being sold out, right? So products are still being sold. The question is, what's the nature of the product and when will we see a rebound across multiple categories? And the 30,000 feet is more like, hey, August is spring, summer 21 market, right? So like you still have to plan for being in business for 2021. Maybe your collections are shifting in terms of what your deliveries are for the next couple months, but the nature of our beast is that things are continuously moving forward. And in my mind, that is a great deal of consolation in this industry, is that this is not a dying industry. This is a continuously evolving industry, which means if a brand misses a season, which can happen oftentimes for a number of different reasons, it doesn't necessarily mean that that business is going out of business. It means that they've shifted and taken a step back and haven't decided to ship or do business during that time period. So I think that's also important to keep it in perspective. As a climate, we kind of went from everything's going to be fine to, oh my gosh, everything is changing. And then everyone got really scared and panicked. But now I think as the stimulus package passes, as we start to see some normalization, hopefully in the next 2 months, things will begin to start to revamp. And I think you bring up a great point, Andrea, which is, what are you doing today to be able to impact your business when business eventually starts to resume? As opposed to having a panic, maybe you'll be planning instead of that.
That is correct. Use this time to plan, because if you don't plan for when business is going to be opening up and booming again, you're going to be far behind some of your competition.
Absolutely. So I wanted to kind of bring some attention here. We have quite a few brands who are, thinking about launching for the first time during this time period. Possibly they were looking at launching in the summer or like a spring 2 collection. Obviously, things have changed. Brand launches have changed. At our office, we're seeing clients who are saying, okay, do we want to even just start the conversation on social, start to get people engaged with our brand, start to have a perspective and a point of view, or do we want to hold off entirely and wait until things die down? Do any of our panelists here have thoughts on kind of how to approach a launch during this time period? And if not, I'll chime in. All right, Tim, go ahead.
I do. And actually, I can kind of relate that to back in 2008 when the economy took a major crash. I would probably say during that time, we probably brought on the best designers we've had, best group of designers we have ever had in that short period of time. Everything was going this way. And every brand that already existed was dealing with all these already existing problems. These companies were laying off these amazing designers that were designing products for major brands, and it gave them an opportunity to do things for themselves. And they also didn't have all the problems they had to deal with that existing business had: employees, overhead. So they got to put together a product, launch it into a market, and actually launch a product that people actually wanted for that time period. So they actually had a big leg up. And they were also much more careful with their money, because I think we went through a nice boom here for a while, and a lot of companies were spending and spending and spending, and they were expecting seasonal growth and big growth from period to period. And all of a sudden they had everything just went quits on them. So a new company coming in is going to be much more careful on their overhead. They're not going to build inventory. They're going to do things like they were doing it after 2008. During the last crash, where anybody that went in business during that time was much more careful. They followed trends much closer. They built their overhead slowly. So I would say if somebody's out there trying to launch their own business right now, they're in a better situation than they would have been in, say, 6 months to a year ago.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with Tim, because they're not carrying all of this overhead and baggage that a lot of organizations are. I also think for companies that are in their infancy, this is really a great time to do a lot of research, because your consumers are home and they are starved for content. There's not a whole lot of new stuff coming out, they're not walking around stores. So they're really on social media wanting to see stuff and be entertained. And so really leverage that captive audience right now and do a lot of research. Who is following me? Which posts am I doing? Are people responding to? And try to figure out why and what that market wants. It's a great time to really do a deep dive in who is my consumer and what are they wanting and how do I meet that need?
Yeah, what I think is so interesting is, in the perspective of digital, you bring up digital, and I get a little nervous around overhyping digital, because right now I feel like the cost on digital is high, right? It's like all of a sudden everyone's like budgets that were going to be on like billboards, right? And like all these other like, there's been all these spends, right? The trade show budgets or everything else. Like now everyone's taken all their budgets and they're like throwing it into digital. And so my biggest concern with digital is that the cost of acquisition on digital, I'm afraid is going to get quite high, simply because of the demand and saturation of needing to be on there. And it's one of those things where I always feel like in the last year and a half or so, we've been looking at Facebook and Instagram, and it's been very much a landscape of, oh my gosh, how do I as a small brand create noise? And I think to go back to how do you understand customers or competition, this is the time to create authentic communication. The brands that have that communication with their audiences are going to be the ones who are really going to win. And that's where I think being a small business has the most amount of success and value. The bigger businesses, they don't have a small business voice. They try to be small business like, but they fail consistently. And I think one of the biggest advantages that a small business has is that they can go on Instagram Live. They can start to have these, more intimate parties where they're showcasing product. We're seeing a lot of brands be very innovative in terms of selling things directly from their Instagram stories, or finding ways of doing styling events and finding ways of making things more digital on an organic level, which is where I think the strength of brand relationships with the community is so strong. But whenever I hear like digital and I think of ad spends, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's gonna become so expensive to be able to win back in a digital landscape now if you don't already have existing community. And I think the one thing we're hearing from everyone today is community and your audience and relationships are not only good for business on your vendor side, but also on the relationship for your consumer side, which I think is like so important. As far, guys, as as you're seeing in terms of how things are moving forward, Tim, you really kind of spoke to some upside for small businesses, and I'd really like to kind of expand on what upside might look like. Like what might this also be a good key indicator for, and why might a small business continue forward? So panelists, I see a lot of upside for small businesses on negotiating terms and contracts, obviously on the financial side. Are there other upsides that you're seeing for small businesses during this time period?
Yeah, I have something, to speak to that for small businesses, especially brands, small brands, medium-sized brands. I think it's a good time to focus. The world is focused on the same thing right now. It's on everybody's minds. So I do feel like it's a time for brands to work smarter, be smarter with their financials, and focus on what their brand is about. And like Shama was saying, be authentic in your communication. And just focus down. Like, don't try to be everything to everybody, and don't lose your way in that sense, because that's the problem with some of the bigger brands and big box stores, is that they kind of lost their way. So if you're a small brand and you have a product and you're solving problems for customers on a daily basis, keep doing that and keep focusing in on what your message is, and just drive it home. Like, you don't have to launch with a 25 or a 50-piece collection. You could launch with a really smart, pared down, edited, really well done collection, whether it's your first season or your 10th season. Just work with what you have and be as smart as you can in this economy, because when this blows over in 2, 3, 4 months, or however long it takes, it's temporary. People are still going to need clothes. The retail industry is going to pick back up, but I feel like we are all in this together right now, and just having the conversations, keeping the communities open, and just kind of fielding the storm as we all are together, it is kind of the way to go. And that's what we're telling our brands too. Just focus down and do what's most important and what's going to really speak your brand to the world. And whether you use all the digital platforms or however you end up doing it, is just keep focused is my feedback on that.
I would totally agree with that. This is a time to not get caught up in the panic and what everybody else is doing, and a great time to turn inwards and look at your organization. What am I really doing? And look at the strategy. And if you've never done like a traditional strategy, look at your organization. This is a perfect time to do it. One of my favorite tools is called a SWOT analysis, SWOT. It stands for strength, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. You can go online and Google it. You can reach back out to me. I'm happy to help you with it. And it's really looking at what is your organization really good at? What are you weak at? Where are opportunities that you haven't taken advantage of or that you could in the future? And what are your threats and what are you going to do about it?
Awesome.
Yeah, and I agree there too. I mean, we talk about probably the most overused words right now, which I use both of them, are authenticity and community, right? But it's really important to be authentic, in your outreach. I think we saw a barrage of emails, over the last couple of days about sales and, people trying to, I've never received so many emails in my life. So to be calculated about your communication. And like Shema, you said, digital scares me too, as well, in terms of the spend that these brands have to put out there to cut through the noise. We're mostly an in-person company, and I don't think that that's going to go away. And I think that people really still just kind of need to foster those relationships, but be calculated about where they're putting their money, and don't think that this is just a massive rush to digital.
I love what you're saying here about putting things on sale. In fact, one of the questions that I was going to pose was, what do we do with inventory? And this kind of brings me back to almost like, looking at historical crashes that we've seen in innovation and inventory management. And, there 2008, all of a sudden it was like everyone was flash sailing, everything was deep discounts. And, out of that crisis, right? Not only did we see this really terrible thing happen on the retail side, which was kind of, how do we start to readjust our inventory levels? And all of a sudden it became this huge contraction in inventory. And then we saw the rise of off price. And then we saw the rise of direct to consumer, which I believe both were really significantly born out of the crash in 2008. And so now when I'm seeing these brands are, slashing things and putting them on sale, one of my biggest fears is, who's going to go first to go deep. And if whoever goes first and goes deep is going to set off a panic and a huge ripple effect across all the other retailers, which is then going to really, I think, have a significant negative impact, both in terms of the retail business, but then also from the consumer side in terms of their expectations. So right now it's easy to see brands that are saying, okay, like Saks with like a 25% off, or you're starting to see get $250 off of your $1,000 purchase. But what are some other strategies, guys, in terms of being able to manage your inventory, not put everything on sale, because I think it looks like you're going out of business if you're a small company. How should a small business be looking at sales and inventory right now? Anybody?
I mean,
Well,
I can pitch up. Oh, Tim, go ahead. No, go ahead, Tim.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead. I'll chime in after.
Okay. I mean, I was going to say about, again, being calculated about looking at your flow of products, in reality. And if you're putting everything on sale right now, your entire website, you're not leaving much room to like kind of claw back in terms of your whole price, strategy once things turn around. So I really do think that people have to look at their merchandising assortments on their sites and really think about what has longevity and maybe releasing that later, because I think that's the only way to salvage this. And I think we all have different hypotheses of what happened after 2008. I mean, I was a definite benefit of the Saks shoe sale that they had, post that crash. But it definitely created this turn in the industry that we haven't gotten out of. And my mind goes crazy sometimes of like, is this like, a recorrection of something that happens, back then in a way. So I don't know what Tim has to say about what I said, but go ahead.
I really 100% agree. I mean, with all the advice we've been giving everybody is the last option is to reduce your prices at this time. However, it's also, we're in survival mode. I mean, these companies are in survival mode. They're doing whatever they possibly can. They get rid of their inventory and keep the lights on. So like they are in that battle. They're battling between doing what they know is right for their brand and for the future of their brand, and also keeping the lights on. So it is definitely a tough scenario they're in right now, for sure. Those questions are coming up nonstop when we're speaking with our brands. And I don't know if there is a right answer. I mean, definitely the right answer is not to reduce prices, but you can't say to somebody that's also laying off all their employees and not sure if they're going to be in business in July. So.
Yeah, that's it's scary times, you know, as far as, you know, resources that you guys are, you know, turning your looking at yourselves. You know, obviously I know the SBA is a tremendous resource for a lot of small businesses out there. You know, we've kind of, internally at Scaling Retail, we've put together a list of, you know, small business resources to just start to figure out, hey, these are links to where you might be able to get some more information on grants or loans, et cetera. Are there other places that you guys are seeing as great hubs of information, especially around the financing issue? Because, you know, we're still getting quite a bit of questions coming in around access to capital and really the ability to find that. And certainly there are a lot of questions around the application process, though none of us here are going to be guiding people through the application process. But are there resources that you guys find useful we can pass on?
Yeah, SBA is great. The website and sometimes the language is really difficult to navigate. And so I also point people to ABA, American Bankers Association. And you can get information directly from the banks about how to do it, what to do. They update it a lot. And it's for me a little bit more clear.
Got it. Yeah, thank you. I think that's important. And then the
Also,
other
there are plenty
question.
of accountants that handle that too. There are plenty of accountants out there that will handle all the paperwork, submittal, and everything. And we've been providing lists of good accounting firms that have been helping brands submit all the SBA information.
Amazing. Well, if you
And
guys
also
don't mind, then
I was
sorry, I was
gonna
going to say,
also-
when we put out our replay of this, we'll make sure to send out your guys' email. So don't be scared here. Go ahead, Hillary.
I was going to say, at Brand Assembly, we're trying to scale down all of the information to the most simple as possible. You know, as I mentioned, we open Slack channels for both brands and for retailers to kind of disseminate that information and break it down. So even just advice that, you know, Tim's giving out and Hilden's giving out and all the resources in our network, we're just trying to simplify that for everybody as well.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, we'll make sure everyone has access to each of you after today. I think that you guys have all been very helpful and encouraging. You know, I think that there's a lot of questions and people are still concerned about how to message and market, you know, within this time period. And again, like I said before, I think it's, and you've been saying it also, Hillary, it's that authenticity around brand communication that I think is so important. Swot, one specific question for you that's come up is around domestic versus international production and manufacturing. And are you anticipating, given what's happening, I mean, even though, let's say, factories are open in China right now, are people still hesitant to, you know, get their orders from there? Are they looking to drastically shift manufacturing? You know, should someone be dropping, you know, like what is the panic? Or are people saying, okay, we're going to wait, we feel safe, this is going to be confident? Or is there now going to be a huge surge in demand for domestic manufacturing, that those manufacturers are now going to get backlogged and there's going to be some challenges there? What's your perspective?
Yeah, lots going on there. It's such a loaded topic right now. We are experiencing two things, like you're saying. Domestically, our vendors are closed, factories are closed, our fabric sources that have offices in the United States that we work with on a daily basis are closed. So we're kind of like on pause with the United States. The rest of the world internationally, Thailand, Sri Lanka, Peru, China, besides China right now, we've been quoted a 2-week closure for those vendors, factories and fabric mills. China, we were lucky enough that the vendors that we work with in China did not shut down. They got back up and running after Chinese New Year. We didn't experience a delay. There's a couple of them that were delayed, so they didn't open back up in February. And we are trying to be as business as usual with them, with our Chinese vendors. They're sending us fabrics, they're sending us samples. You know, the biggest delay for us in terms of China is shipping, because there's just delays in customs all over the world, but delays in customs on shipping us goods to the United States. We don't have anything specifically on the production line right now, but we are in developments with China. I would say more on the inquiry level, like we get about 20 to 30 inquiries to our company on a daily basis. So people are asking the questions of, you know, where are you guys manufacturing? Are you guys seeing an issue with China? Or, you know, they're a little bit wary, but there hasn't been anything that's more like, how do I say, like a definite no, you know, to China, or a yes to another country. Our concern is that when the vendors do open up, they will be backlogged. So if a factory, you know, our LA factories are quoting April 20th. If they open on April 20th, are they going to be ready to ship our goods or to pick back up exactly where they left off in our process? Probably not. So we're buffering at least 2 weeks from the time that they reopen to say, like, okay, your project will, you know, we'll pick back up like May 5th. And maybe another week after that for us to actually get the samples. So we've slowed down. By any means, we're not like saying, no, we can't produce in certain parts of the world. It depends. We get a lot of different brands in terms of like where they want to produce, or what's in their brand story. Are they made in USA? Is that something that's super important to their brand? If it is, you know, obviously we stick with the United States. Some brands have expressed concern over China, but not really in relation to COVID. I mean, people have preconceptions and notions and thoughts about China or Thailand or Asia or India or any other parts of the world, Bangladesh, on the regular basis. So we're not seeing a lot of pushback from brands on China. However, we are prepared to pivot if we need to. We do everything super professionally, that we can be agile and pivot to another vendor if we need to, if it's important to the brand, you know, or if we discuss it with them or come to some sort of agreement that, you know, another vendor is best, you know, for the production of their product. But we're not swaying our opinion in terms of China versus United States.
Got it. And obviously with India now being shut down, you know, and kind of as these different countries are taking measures, I mean, I guess it's just a matter of seeing how things pan out.
Yeah, it's just like a day by day, week by week, you know, and we're based in New York. So it's like hour by hour, just news drops and it's like the apocalypse here right now. So it's, we're just kind of keeping calm and pushing forward. But yeah, our India vendors are closed and our Bangladesh vendors are closed. So we're still communicating with them and we can still work on designing. We do, you know, obviously we do tech packs and specs and all of those other things. So we have a lot of work that we can front load. We are using this time as an opportunity to catch up on the front end of work, also work on branding and just do as much as we can until we need to rely on the factories and rely on the fabric mills. There's a lot of other things that we can focus on at the moment. But we are keeping in mind that it is temporary and, you know, things are just going to push out in terms of delivery dates.
Got it. Thank you. So each of you guys have been so extremely valuable. I feel like we could continue for another hour because there's so much to talk about. But what I'd like to do is kind of do a bit of a round robin as we opened up this conversation and have you guys share some parting words, not just in terms of advice to some of these small businesses, anything else you think that we may have missed that would be very valuable, but also how you guys are managing your own mental health, you know, and kind of landscape during this time period. I feel that there's so much going on. We all seem to be very level-headed here today on the webinar, but I bet you each of you has had a freak out in the last week. So, you know, what are you guys doing to help yourselves? You know, I think as one person to another in the midst of crisis. So the question is two parts, you know, any parting words and thoughts and ideas for our small business owners here today. And then also, what on earth are you doing to stay sane? And Danielle, I'll start with you.
Did I unmute it? Okay, perfect. Great. One of the things I just wanted to touch on, which I think came up last time, and I'm seeing a lot of brands do it, and I think it's a wonderful thing, are these charitable marketing things that, 20% of goods will go to, X charity. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. It's called cause marketing, and there are legal requirements when you do it. It's kind of like no good deed goes unpunished kind of thing, that when you do it, you have to make sure that at least it's registered in the state. There are legal requirements. So if anybody is thinking about doing it, just either contact a lawyer or thoroughly research to see what you need to do to be legally compliant. So that's one thing and that's a thing that nobody really knows about, and could become a big deal. What I'm doing to stay sane, I have no idea. I'm homeschooling 4 kids, so I don't know. They're all in the pool right now, like smushed to the door, waiting to come inside. Trying to get as much exercise as I can to just kind of let everything go.
I will say a prayer for you today. I'll be like, all right, anyone who's homeschooling gets extra special kudos and gold stars.
And then if anybody knows 5th grade math, I will hire you as a tutor. Just let me know, email me, DM me, hit me up on Instagram. I don't care. I just need all the help I can get at this point.
Don't we all? Oh my gosh. All right, Danielle. Well, extra special kudos. And if anyone has good support systems for Danielle, please pass along. Holly, last parting words, ideas and thoughts that you think our small business owners need to know today, and how are you maintaining a sense of sanity?
So I would say parting words and takeaways just for this time, because we've never really dealt with anything like this, is that we're all going through it together. And I would just really encourage business owners to just kind of take a breath before kind of choosing the panic. And I think just kind of taking a minute to remember that, like, we're all doing our best, so your employees are doing their best, your vendors are, your customers are, and then, making a conscious effort to demonstrate that you're doing your best for them back, because when we're all in it together and we're doing our best for each other, it's gonna, I think, bring a little bit more relief to the whole cause. So that would be my parting words on this. And then for myself, I'm just doing a lot of check-ins, like checking in on a lot of people. FaceTime's great, Zoom is great. And just like seeing how everybody's doing around my community and my circle and around the country. And just like, it's good to reach out and be a friend. And then all of a sudden you realize how many you have back. So that's what I'm doing.
Here's to community, right? We need them now, need them more than ever. So Tim, are you homeschooling? Let's talk about. Let's start with the words of wisdom here, and what people should be thinking about, and anything you want to impart. And then I'd love to hear your homeschooling strategies right now.
Well, I mean, I have older teenagers, so they're kind of doing their thing, but they're a handful in itself. I think for all kinds of reasons, but that part is actually pretty much well taken care of, to tell you the truth. So, but all I do all day long is take calls from clients, and I know I'm kind of like, I feel like I'm not a doom and gloom type of person. I'm always a very positive person. But when 1 out of 10, almost 9 out of 10 calls I'm taking is about, oh my God, what am I going to do next? It's pretty crazy. But then I'll take a 1 call, like I took today, from somebody I thought would be nice to share. I took a call from somebody. Well, it's not actually a client, it's actually somebody I've been talking to for a while. I've helped out a lot of different ways. And he has built sort of the multiple prongs in business, which is the wholesale, the retail, the direct to consumer part of the business. And one thing I think people are going to learn from this catastrophe is that they're going to learn a lot by not putting all their eggs in one basket, meaning they're going to have all these different prongs going on at the same time. So if something goes down, the other ones can pick it back up again. And the conversation I had with him was that my wholesale business is in the shitter. It's done. It's like for right now, it's done right now. It'll probably come back, but I'm not sure when. But my direct to consumer business is up 40%. And what was interesting about it is his product category. He was an athleisure brand, and athleisure is kind of been one of those kind of categories that's kind of like teetered around relevance and not, and it's done well at times and not well at other times. And right now, what is everybody sitting around on? And I mean, obviously we're in nice shirts because we're on this webinar, but we probably all have yoga pants on. Well, I don't have yoga pants on, but you probably all have yoga pants on. So, but I'm lucky if I have any pants. No, I'm just kidding. So, but what I'm really saying is that that depending on the category, I mean, these multiple pronged businesses, it's going to be that much more important. And everybody's going to learn from this this bad time that everybody's in about how they'll have their business going forward in a and function in multiple different ways that can ward off situations like this. That's really the bottom line. So I feel very positive about the outlook going forward because all the calls I'm taking right now is all about right now. And they're all going to learn from it and they're all going to go forward even stronger.
I love that. You know, I feel that there's one thing that we really have, which is just in general in our industry, I feel like we've all had our retail wounds. We've all been kind of scarred into the industry and we're all in it together to a very large degree. And innovation and agility and our ability to create lemonade from lemons is something that I think we've all had to adapt to in this industry as we've all been in it for quite some time. Personally, I can say one of my friends the other day made fun of me because I now own 3 sweatsuits and I'm now officially looked at as a geriatric living in Florida. So Danielle, I'll be heading over to you in my powder blue sweatsuits as I take on a whole new look. Andrea, tell us a little bit how last parting words to our audience and how are you managing your sanity?
Well, I'm homeschooling 2 little ones, a lot of jelly beans and M&Ms and popsicles. But on the business side, really coming in a lot with the words like, I reject your panic. And then where's your pivot point? For every organization, and even more so for a small business, there is a pivot point. So look for it, stand on it, and pivot to whatever your company is going to be. This is a great time to do something that you've always wanted to try or go in a slightly different direction. And personally, I mean, 5 o'clock somewhere.
I think everyone I know on here is like a 5 o'clock somewhere status, right?
New recipes for drinking and making drinks, and it comes out really great almost every single time.
So Andrea, will you be pivoting and launching a cocktail cookbook or drink book for all of us?
And that cookbook goes alongside with the homeschooling manual.
I love that. Thank you. And Swot, tell us, how should our small businesses be thinking about, the production and manufacturing? Now, last minute parting words, and what's making you happy? How are you keeping sane?
I think that our small businesses that we work with, and us included, is finding the opportunity in change, being resourceful, being agile. I think there's an opportunity in the tops market because nobody needs to wear pants right now. There's just opportunities and just for people to find them and to work really hard and be resourceful and come out stronger with this, in the end, for your business. This is going to change, I think, how we do business, whether it's like on a virtual level, and a slew of other things, like we're running virtual fittings. We're working with our professional fit models. We're doing it virtually so we can, keep our process moving. So just finding the opportunity in change is sort of our mindset right now at Stateless. And, and just for peace of mind for us, in our city, we're working with our overseas vendors to ship up to 10 million masks to healthcare workers. So, if you guys know of anybody that needs, one of our clients is a leading pulmonologist on the front lines at one of the hospitals in New York City. So we are working, with our vendors to help in any way we can as well. I am running a preschool / daycare at home. I have a 1-year-old, so it's like impossible to work from home and have a little one. So, you know, we're doing well, just kind of switching off and on all day. There's like a lot of wooden toy fruit around and paint and sponges and stuff. So just working on that and you know, spending time with my daughter and really enjoying that is, you know, something I'm working on, and also just trying also to keep pushing forward. You know, wine helps. It's 5 o'clock somewhere, you know, FaceTime happy hours, hit me up if you guys are interested, be, you know, staying connected and just, you know, carrying on as much as we can.
I love that. I feel like coming out of this, we're going to see a lot of stories and articles around just the strength and benefits of human connection, and how, you know, so many of us who are, you know, thought of as just being so isolated on our phones are now turning to our phones and to be able to be more authentically connected. And yeah, how we manage loneliness and isolation during this time period, I think, is going to be really interesting and remarkable. You know, also the way in which people's family home dynamics are shifting. So you guys home with kids, right? It's like, this is a different kind of experience as you guys are being in touch with family in a different way. So interesting cultural shifts on the rise. You know, the work from home, how we're managing families, being connected digitally more intimately. Very, very exciting stuff. And Hillary, please share with us parting words and also moments of sanity and how you're keeping it together.
Yeah, of course. So I too am running a daycare up here in Hudson, New York. Unfortunately, it's for a 41-year-old male called my fiance Lucas. So we're having a good time up here. But you know, I think things to keep in mind are you know, keeping a sense of calmness. I know it's easy to panic in this situation, but when you're calm, you make much more sane decisions and much more thoughtful decisions. You know, to keep pushing yourself to be innovative, to keep thinking of ways to navigate this that are unique to you and to your own brand or to your own store. So that's kind of my advice. Things that are keeping me sane are definitely some walks up here. I'm lucky enough to be up about 2 hours north of New York City right now. Apparently something that's going to keep me sane too is this Netflix show that's everybody's talking about a man with some tigers. I don't know, but apparently that's going to keep me sane as well. I haven't tried that out, but I'm on my weekends, my weekend schedule for sure. And then my team, of course, we do daily touch bases. We have a 5 p.m. happy hour tonight, just seeing their faces still, and you know, having some fun and being able to have some lightness in light of everything that's going on. I value them more than anything. So
that's wonderful. You'll have to share with me the name of the show so we can syndicate it
like
out
to
our attendees as we send out the replay. I'm also looking for some new Netflix shows. You know, guys, thank you very much for all of your time today. You know, I would say my parting words are very similar to all of yours, which is, you know, this is a time for a community. This is a time for looking at ways in which we can leverage opportunities. I think that, you know, the ways in which a small business can succeed can be anything today from, you know, developing and cultivating a strong communication and marketing strategies, doing deep dives into your business management operating systems, being able to find moments, like Andrea said, to pivot your business, finding opportunities to work strategically with your retail partners, going over all of your old contracts, making sure that you're looking at your line planning and assortment planning, and really reinforcing maybe some clauses in your employee handbook in order to make sure that as things kind of come up, that you are well prepared. This might be an unprecedented time, and hopefully one that we don't see come up ever again, but this is definitely a moment where we're all seeing the holes in our businesses, where we're seeing, hey, I was overly reliant on wholesale. Now I needed to pivot to digital. No one's building a website in a weekend. It's going to see sales. So take your time to build out strategies properly. Take your time to reinforce your revenue. Take your time to make sure you're, you know, shoring up those contracts. And instead of canceling contracts, find ways of extending them or pushing them off to a later date. You know, being conscious and conscientious of your partners is really going to be what keeps your business strong during this time, but certainly it's going to allow you to be successful when you come out of it. At the Scaling Retail office, we opened up our doors to do 1 hour free crisis management sessions. Yesterday, I had the pleasure of talking to a business that had 40 locations, coffee shop, restaurant locations all over Kenya. And we were talking about different ways in which her business can actually start to do shipping and, you know, be able to deliver food and, you know, all of those things. I mean, this is a time to draw on your community. Oh, here we go. We've got some friends over here. Danielle, when you want to say hi and introduce us to part of the crew.
You want to say hi?
Yay!
Holiday, Willow, Winter, and Everly.
I love it. It is definitely a family affair during a time of crisis. But guys, you know, please make sure you stay on lookout for an email from us. We'll be giving direct contacts and links and information to everyone here today, as well as links out to resources that we've mentioned. Internally, we've also started a small business list for businesses that are currently able to ship during this time of crisis. Obviously, we want to be able to support those businesses. Everyone loves Nordstrom's, but guys, this is a great time to be able to promote shipping direct to consumer from some of the small brands that we want to support during this time. And I guess any other parting words is stay in touch. You know, I've been able to stay sane through putting my feet on the grass and being able to let some sun shine in my face. I feel grateful that all of us here today stand in service to the people and to the industry that we love and that we're passionate and connected to. And I feel grateful for that. So those are some of my parting words. But thank you guys very much for your time today. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye, everyone.